and gentlemen, I've got a big pleasure to introduce Mrs. Amalia Agathou, and this is our second day today in track advices, startup advices, and I think we can start.
Thank you.
It's late. Okay.
Well, why don't you all come a little bit forward? It's a family situation here, so let's make it a little bit easier for me. Thank you, guys. So I'm here to talk about lessons from the front row. And just let me introduce myself a little bit. So I just started working with Dawn Capital, and as head of communications, so I'm doing a little bit of strategy for them, community, events, and of course, looking for awesome startups. So if you're an awesome startup, make sure to come and find me later or tweet me. And before that, I have been doing a little bit of everything. So I started off by studying engineering, and then I somehow ended up working at Glamour magazine as an editor, and I guess I got stuck at the fashion tech twilight zone ever since. The guys asked me to come here and talk a little bit about the lessons I got out of working with London College of Fashion, because most recently I have been working with them on building up Front Row IO, which is an organization that supports the fashion tech startups. And we did it with a series of events on anything that has to do with fashion and tech. A series of academy days, which was mostly focused on educating fashion people into tech. And also an accelerator program, because every organization or brand out there want to have their own accelerator. It's a new thing to have. So we had an accelerator program which lasted 3 months. We had 6 amazing startups that varied from mobile applications to wearable technology, and they were all at different stages, because we also wanted, from this first program to figure out, what really would add value to these teams. And we also had in the program a series of scheduled sessions, and then every month we would do an evaluation session to see, at this point where they are, what is best for them, who they should talk one-on-one. So we had one-on-one mentoring for every startup tailored to their needs. And we also had a Founders Connect thing, which would happen every month, and we would go to visit the headquarters of an already established and successful fashion tech startup, just to give them a little bit of a backstage view, and to talk not only with the founders, but also the people that were, building this thing. So I guess the reason they asked me to come here and talk about all that is that fashion tech scene has really gotten a lot of buzz lately, and a lot of funding. That's from Crunchbase, and it shows the funding that has been going on recently. Last year it was $900 million, and they are expecting to top it this year. And as you can see, London and New York, of course, take the cut. But it's, I think, especially with the rise of wearable tech and the huge market it is expected to be, it's a conversation that everybody has. So what's really so special about being a fashion tech startup? What's different from any other kind of startup? Well, when we wanted to kind of set the tone for Front Row, I asked my super talented friend, designer Karis Cevis, to help us kind of visualize what that perfect fashion tech entrepreneur is at. And it's a mix of Steve Jobs and Coco Chanel, apparently. I think they both have a lot of things in common. And when you are in the intersections of 2 fields and 2 industries, you really need to think both sides. And when you go on to build your team, you really need to think about co-creation processes, and not one thing leading the other, but really coming together to create something unique. So first of all, what you need to do is do your research and figure out what is important, because a lot of the times we think about we shop or our friend's shop or our mother's shops and think, we got the answer. Yeah, that's how people roll. But more often than not, this is really not the case. So I would really suggest to do your research and talk to people that work. If you do B2B, talk to people and figure out which processes are the longest. which processes take the most pain out of them. Or if you're a B2C, sales associates know everything. It's hard being a good sales associate. And sales associates and the way they work differ if they sell for fast fashion or for luxury fashion. So they really do have a lot of insight. I think even if you just go and sell stuff, like go and be a sales associate yourself, you get valuable information out there. But I think a lot of times entrepreneurs are a little bit hesitant to go out there and talk to the real people. And that's where they really miss it. They prefer to go and talk to a very important mentor, or they prefer to go and talk to somebody who is running a company, or at a conference, or to somebody like me. But the truth is, probably a sales associate has better answers than me. Another thing we also see because of that, first of all, we see a lot of times startups trying to sell data to retailers that they don't really need. They probably have them already, or they're trying to sell them data that it's nice to have, but they're extremely high priced. Or a lot of the times like analytics tools or stuff like that, you know, if you do your research and know what, usually it's the budget for a medium fashion brand, a lot of the times it's very, very expensive for them and they just won't go through with that. If your solution is more expensive than the problem you're trying to solve, people prefer to stay with a cheap problem rather than go after an expensive solution. And the other thing we also see because of that is to see the same pitch over and over again. So these apps and these startups, I have seen them get pitched to me in many different languages, in many different countries, and for many, many years. And if you have something like that, it's not bad, but just to make sure that you're aware that these pitches have been around for a long time, and people really want to see that you have a value proposition and it's really something different. So yeah, just talk to people and figure out what do you need for customer development. That's a big part of running a fashion company, to make that same customer become loyal and then also grow their spending, so kind of maximize. How do you take a sales associate and make their life easier, and you know, from them being a great sales associate, really turn them into something super, give them the right tools to maximize their potential? Another research that you need to do is figure out who is important. A lot of the times, it's not the person that you really think is important. So for instance, at Dior, everybody know the head designer. Everybody know that Galliano worked for Dior. A lot of people don't know who is the head of Dior Couture, though. And she's a woman that has been around for a very long time there. She has seen head designers come and go. And she really brings a lot of money in for Dior. So I think maybe she's more important than the people that you usually see in the press. So you have to figure out who makes the key decisions when it comes to fashion, who really decides, you know, what tool they're gonna use on the back end to make the orders from a factory, how they choose the payment methods and all that. So figure out who really does these things. Another thing people underestimate are assistants. These three ladies are the assistants of Anna Wintour. So probably it's gonna be super difficult to talk to Anna Wintour, or even, you know, try to get an email across her. But it's much easier to reach out to her assistant and talk to her, and she is a person that screens what goes through and what gets in front of her in her office. So assistants have more influence than you would think. So really try to figure out which is the right person to talk for you and what you want to get out of that. Yeah, fashion is a different space. It's not like tech. And when we're talking about fashion tech, fashion comes always first. So it's another industry, and you need to play by their rules. First of all, in fashion, looks do matter. So yeah, maybe going in, you know, with the flip-flops and the hoodie, maybe it's a cool thing to do in the valley, but in the fashion scene, especially if you're trying to pitch that you know style and you know what's happening in fashion, people maybe are gonna doubt you. Or a lot of the times I see a lot of fashion tech entrepreneurs go in and they try to do a big fashion statement where, you know, the hottest accessories and trends, and more often than not they get it wrong. It's also very distracting because you notice more what they wear rather than what they're pitching. So just, you know, keep it simple, but keep it nice as well. And if you go to talk to a brand and pitch something to them, it's always nice to dress like the brand, have like an accessorize, or, you know, to their spirit and what they're trying to sell. So if you go to a brand like All Saints, which is more like, you know, rock and roll, more, you know, same tones, black and white and all that, maybe it's not nice to go in there and be like this crazy person with the fuchsia and all that crazy colors. Another thing that you also need to think about fashion is that these people are perfectionists. If you have ever heard the stories about Steve Jobs and, you know, how he was, you know, down to perfectionism and he would make a huge deal out of the right shade of yellow or not, that's like Monday morning in every fashion office in the world. These people really notice details, it matters to them, and they really want to see that everything is on point. So you can't really, you know, fake it there. You really need to pay attention to detail. And they will appreciate it, and they will notice. Another thing that you need to do is also make sure that you know the fashion calendar, you know which times are busy or not. When you're going to pitch to an investor, you know which is the best time to pitch to an investor in terms, you know, within the calendar year. In fashion, that goes as well. So if you try to pitch a fashion magazine August and September, I can already tell you that you're not gonna get featured because it's before Fashion Week, everybody already has enough to cover, and they also, you know, probably won't even see it at all. The amount of communication that happens before these shows is just enormous. So if I were you and I was trying to pitch somebody in fashion, I would probably pick July or December, which are more quiet months. Another thing that you also need to take into account is that these people can scan you and they can tell just but what you're wearing. They can put a price tag on you and they know how much you make a year. So it's good, you know, not to go with very well-known brands. Just, you know, keep it simple. Maybe be an indie designer. You have great designers here in Poland. Pick something like that. So I care about fashion and that's it. You don't know anything more about me. It comes very handy when it comes to negotiations. When it comes to mentors and investors and accelerators, a lot of startups ask me, you know, should I go to a very specific accelerator that has to do with fashion, or should I go to a more generic one? You know, how to go about investment on mentors. In terms of accelerators, what we saw from our program is that the startups that were very early on in the game, they were a little bit overwhelmed, and I think they didn't take advantage to the maximum of the offer of the one-on-one mentoring and what they could really get out of that. Because they were at a stage which any mentoring was good, and they had so many things to work around that they really couldn't, you know, maximize that potential. For startups that were a little bit later on, so we also had a few startups like Stylect, Tinder for shoes, you can get the app. So Stylect had already gone through an accelerator program, and they were one of the startups that really took advantage of everything we offer them, because they were at a stage that they knew what they wanted to get into that next step, what they needed to grow, and specific questions they needed to ask in order to get to that next level. When it comes to mentors, you know, of course, always nice to have, especially if somebody from the industry and you have no connections there or no experience. It's nice to have somebody to bounce off ideas. And when it comes to, you know, how that relationships works, if they give you money and they become angel investors in you, that's ideal, because you also get that extra seal of approval. And you know, you're more sure that it will be committed and in the role they have in your company. But in terms of giving equity to mentors that are not really putting any money and just putting in the advice, it's a nice gesture, especially if they had helped you. But the point is to make sure that these people will help you in a, substantially. You don't want to give out equity just to have a glamorous name. This guy's our advisor, and this guy really has nothing to do with you. Just make sure that these people will pick up the phone for you and really help you when it matters. It doesn't matter to have a fancy name associated with your startup. It's not worth giving up equity just to have a fancy name on your slides. For investors, I would say look at, first of all, their portfolio, and if they have relevant experience that could help you. But also, a lot of times, look at the partners themselves and their background. Because a lot of, like for us, for instance, at Dawn, all of the partners are ex-entrepreneurs. So each comes from a different field and brings in a different experience. So, even if you don't see it at the portfolio and look at its CV individually, you can figure out, if that person can really help you or not, what you're trying to achieve. Focus. Focus is a challenge. I mean, there's a lot of buzz in the startup scene, but in fashion there's that, and there's also a lot of glamour to top it off. Don't try to be Vogue. A lot of startups do that. They throw very expensive parties, they throw a lot of money to get celebrities involved, and all that, which is great, and it can help. But if you don't really have a value proposition, it can really do only that much. It can't do more than that. So, of course it's nice to do events and all that, but don't try to compete in a sense to what a fashion magazine does or a fashion brand does, because it will drain you out financially and I think even in energy. Numbers are important, especially if you're into e-commerce, and especially if you're going to grow. You can't really avoid it. No matter how good your idea is, you really need to have, some numbers to back it up. And I think you should also keep track of the time that you spend speaking at events like this one, or with the press, and the time that you speak with your customers. Just keep tab of it. And if at some point you see that you talk a lot more to people that are in the industry or at events or press rather than your customers, then you're probably on the wrong path. And you should make a change about that. Another thing that also happens a lot in fashion, it's partnerships. A lot of startups really get obsessed about locking down a partnership with a big retailer. So it could be ASOS, or it could be H&M, or any big name. And of course, it's great to have a partnership like that, but what you need to keep in mind is that these people can afford to have conversations that go on forever and lead nowhere, and you don't have that luxury. So you really need to be focused. A lot of startups go down that field, and in order to lock down that partnership, they waste a lot of time. They go into discussions again and again and again. They may ask you to change a little bit your product and all that, and you will do it because you'll think, I'm really close to locking down that partnership. But the thing is that this may never happen. So you need to be aware of your time and what you're putting in. Don't underestimate yourself and what you have to offer. Having a partnership is great, but they need to be respectful of you as well. So don't be afraid, to put your foot down, something like that. Yeah. Another thing is, feedback. In fashion, people are not afraid to give you feedback at all. That's what they do for a living. But when they give you feedback, it's not an invitation to have a conversation. It has happened to me a lot of times as I'm mentoring at hackathons as well. You go up to a startup and you say, I think this won't work for this and this reason. And then they say, yes, but. Which is a killer, Of course, you may disagree with the feedback. You may think that this person just hasn't understood your idea or what you're telling. But my advice would be, when somebody gives you feedback, it's best to shut it at the moment and then follow up with an email just a few weeks later, and you can say, thanks again for your feedback. and update what you did, what you changed or you didn't change, or what you saw worked. And just to show that progress and that you appreciated the feedback and really took it in. And when you take feedback, it doesn't mean that you will do whatever people tell you. Because again, we go back to the slide of focus. You don't need to change every time people give you feedback. But you can take it in a smart way. And even if you think that the feedback is completely off and these people just didn't get it, then you have to also look back and think, why didn't they get it? Maybe I miscommunicated it, or maybe I need to clear my pitch or fine-tune something. So, in feedback, there's always something, even if it's on point or off. You all should also always see it from your perspective and how you can improve. Because at the end, everybody, and especially investors, that we want to see from a team. They want to see that it's a team that can move the ball forward and they can progress, and they're not really waiting for something. They just keep moving and improving. So, if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Or if you want to ping me and we can talk it one-on-one later. Yeah.
I have one question, because yesterday we could hear a lot about data-driven businesses.
Mm-hmm.
It means businesses which are strongly supported by analysis, by measures, by numbers. My question is, fashion is quite different business, and I'm wondering how we should be focused on data, measuring tastes and measuring numbers, and how we should be creative, and if we should be trendsetters for our clients. We should inspire them, or we should examine them?
Well, I can tell you that retailers and brands are really thirsty for solutions that are like that, and there is definitely a lot of room for disruption. One advice that I would give you would be, back to the first slide, talk to a lot of people and figure out not only what kind of data is useful to them, but also to figure out the right price point. Because if you're trying to sell them data, which is nice to have but not necessary, at a very high price point, you probably won't be able to lock down some deal. So, just make sure to talk to a lot of people that you get the right price point, and you also, present them with the best data possible. The other thing I would also say for B2B startups like that would be to find an internal champion. It will make your life way easier. What means having an internal champion? Means find that one person in that company that his job will become easier by using your solution. Then this person will go to the meeting with his boss and he will say, I really need, the budget to get this tool because I will get that much done. So you don't really have to go to their boss and sell them because, it really doesn't really affect them, so their decision will be called. But if you find somebody who can champion you internally, they can cut the sale for you, which is never a bad thing. It takes some work over you.
But there is one problem. If I have a startup,
mm-hmm.
How can I persuade this internal champion that he needs my product, which doesn't exist?
Well, let's go back to the product. First of all, the product needs to exist. But if you just want, to get some validation, because you don't need a champion if you don't have a product. Let's start with that. Just reach out to people and you say, I'm building this tool and I would like your feedback and all that. More often than not, people will help you, especially people that are not, the ultra big mega star. And they really want you to make that because it will make their life easier. So it's easier to approach these people. That's because I was also talking about assistants and people like that. And in the fashion world, because there are also a lot of politics involved, you never know who is really the most influential person. So a lot of times, for instance, in magazines, the people that end up in editor-in-chief position or like that just end up there because they have the right connections. And the people underneath them are the people that are really, driving the wheel. So yeah, just talk to as many people as possible.
Okay, we've got another question.
I have a question. You said that it's more important to focus on product than on some parties and promote the product, because the product is more important. If you don't have a good product, you can lose only your money. So if you have a good product and you're getting short of money, so what to do?
You should always think it like one step at a time. And when you're to do something, you need to know very specifically what you want to get out of that. So if you throw a party for, to promote this, you will say, I want to do this party or this event, or I need to, travel to that conference because I want to meet that specific person, or I want to get that kind of press. So you really need to do it by being focused. You need to know that, I want to do this partnership in order to get to this point. A lot of times, startups do stuff just, to be in the buzz, to have that traction thing. And they're not really thinking, yeah, but what's in it there for me? You should always think, what's in it there for me? Because your resources are very limited. So you really need to be able to take, decisions and manage them.
I wanted to ask about the map that you showed in the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you think it's important for a startup to be somewhere around the fashion capitals of the world? I mean, we're based in Poland, so do you think a Polish-based fashion startup should move to London?
At some point, somebody from your team will have to be on location. It doesn't mean that you will have to move everybody. So, keep your developers here, happy, great food, great vodka, and low cost for you, because you don't have to get that funding and move all the team to London. Your runway will be shrinked by, you don't know how fast. It's super expensive to be there. But on the other hand, meetings are one-on-one, and being on location matters. But you can decide who makes sense to be on location. And really, if that's also the market for you, because just because a market is, super high buzzed, it doesn't mean a thing. Zalando is making a great success, and they're not focusing London, New York. So just, there's not like a golden rule for all startups. Figure out what's right for you. And, everything you do, just test it out, as, in a small scale. Any other question? Yeah.
I noticed that you left the team,
yeah.
But do you know anything if there will be like a second batch for the accelerator?
Yes, as far as I know, there will be another batch. Right now, they're running the BB program, Building Brand Equity program, which is an existing program that was with the college. But I don't know exactly in which form it will move forward, because most of these programs for universities are European Union funding. So it all comes down to that, I guess.
So it will be a year and a half, because the budget just ended.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions?
Yes.
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Always nice to be back.